The heat over southern Afghanistan felt unreal, waves of dust rolling across fields that looked quiet but hid danger everywhere. In the command tents near Kandahar, American officers studied maps covered in red markings. Operation Medusa was supposed to be a hard push against entrenched fighters, but even seasoned generals expected a slow, costly grind. Then the Canadians moved in. At first, the reports sounded ordinary. Armored vehicles advancing, infantry pushing through villages, artillery covering movement. But within hours, radio traffic changed tone. Calls came in faster, voices sharper, almost surprised. One American liaison officer leaned toward the speaker, listening closely. "Canadian units are holding. Wait, they're advancing faster than expected." That wasn't normal. The terrain was brutal. The enemy knew every irrigation ditch and tree line. Most commanders assumed movement would stall under pressure, but it didn't. Canadian troops pushed methodically, not recklessly, clearing positions, regrouping, and advancing again. U.S. observers noticed something unusual. There was no chaos in their rhythm. Even under fire, communication stayed calm and precise. Later, one American general reportedly said the same thing others were thinking. They're moving like they've done this together for years. Inside the operations room, officers replayed updates again and again. The Canadians weren't simply advancing, they were adapting faster than expected. When resistance stiffened, their formation shifted. When visibility dropped, their coordination tightened instead of collapsing. By evening, aerial surveillance confirmed what ground observers already suspected: positions expected to hold for days had fallen in hours. The American command staff exchanged looks. No one said it out loud yet, but many realized they had underestimated what they were watching. Outside, helicopters thumped overhead as the sun dropped low, casting long shadows over the dust-covered battlefield. The first day of Operation Medusa was already rewriting expectations. And, for several U.S. generals, the real shock wasn't just the speed, it was the discipline behind it. They weren't fighting harder, they were fighting smarter.
Subscribe to the channel and don't miss new war documentaries.
The second day of Operation Medusa began before sunrise. Dust hung in the air like a curtain, and every radio channel carried the same warning: resistance would be stronger today. Inside the command post, American officers expected the Canadians to slow down. Overnight, intelligence suggested enemy fighters had reinforced key positions, preparing to trap advancing forces in narrow fields and irrigation lines. On paper, it looked like the perfect defensive setup, but as the first reports arrived, something felt different. Canadian units didn't rush forward blindly. They paused, adjusted, then moved again, almost like a single machine changing direction. Where other forces might hesitate under heavy pressure, these troops shifted lanes, flanked positions, and kept their momentum without losing coordination. One U.S. observer watching drone feeds leaned forward and quietly muttered, "They're not reacting, they're predicting." Instead of pushing straight through resistance, Canadian commanders used terrain: small walls, canals, broken compounds, turning what looked like obstacles into advantages. American analysts noticed that communication stayed remarkably clean. Few frantic calls, few requests for emergency support, just calm updates. Minutes later, one stronghold expected to take hours was suddenly cleared. Then another. The operations room went quiet. No cheering, just silence, as officers watched the map change faster than expected. A senior American general finally spoke, almost surprised by his own words. "They're fighting like veterans of this battlefield, and they just got here." Outside, rotor blades thundered overhead. Dust swirled around armored vehicles as Canadian soldiers regrouped and pushed forward again. There was no dramatic charge, only steady, disciplined pressure that slowly broke resistance. What shocked the Americans most wasn't aggression. It was control. Every movement looked calculated. Every advance seemed measured. Even under fire, units stayed organized. Not because the situation was easy, but because they trusted each other. By midday, observers realized something few had predicted. The Canadians weren't just holding the line, they were setting the pace of the entire operation. And for some U.S. generals watching closely, one thought started to grow. If this continues, they may finish faster than anyone planned. By the third phase of Operation Medusa, the battlefield looked nothing like the plan drawn days earlier. What had started as a cautious advance was becoming something else, a steady, relentless pressure that forced enemy positions to collapse one after another. American commanders expected fatigue to slow the Canadians. The heat was brutal, the terrain unforgiving, and intelligence reports warned that resistance would intensify as troops pushed deeper into contested ground. Instead, the opposite happened. The tempo increased. From drone feeds and radio updates, U.S. officers watched Canadian units adjust on the move. When incoming fire pinned one section, another squad shifted almost immediately, moving through narrow irrigation lines and compound walls to outmaneuver the threat. There were no panicked calls, only calm voices confirming positions and next steps. Inside the command center, maps had to be updated constantly. Arrows representing Canadian movement kept stretching forward. One American officer reportedly stared at the screen for several seconds before saying quietly, "They're dictating the battle now." That realization spread quickly. This wasn't just efficient fighting, it was controlled momentum. Canadian commanders avoided unnecessary risks, but they never lost initiative. Every pause had purpose. Every advance seemed to happen exactly when pressure was highest. Helicopter footage showed something that impressed even veteran analysts: troops moving with confidence through terrain that had been labeled extremely dangerous. Instead of slowing down, their coordination tightened. Spacing precise, communication smooth, support arriving at the exact moments it was needed. Outside, dust storms rolled across open fields as armored vehicles advanced behind infantry. The sound of engines blended with distant rotor blades, creating a constant background hum that never fully stopped. An American general watching the situation unfold finally admitted what many were thinking. We expected them to hold the line, not redefine it. As the sun started to fall, key positions that were supposed to resist for days had already changed hands. Commanders began reworking timelines, because the operation was moving faster than anyone predicted. But the biggest shock wasn't speed. It was confidence. The Canadians weren't fighting like a force trying to survive the mission. They were fighting like they already understood how it would end. And for the American observers watching closely, one idea became impossible to ignore. They weren't just witnessing a successful operation. They were watching a leadership style built on trust, discipline, and quiet precision, the kind that changes expectations long after the battle is over. The radio crackled again. Another objective secured. The room fell silent. Someone finally whispered, "They're making this look easier than it should be." And that was the moment many American generals realized. Operation Medusa would be remembered differently than they imagined.
Subscribe to the channel and don't miss new war documentaries.